They say hell is hot. They're wrong. Hell is cold. Hell is 20 degrees below zero with the wind cutting through your uniform like knives. Hell is Stalingrad in winter. Before the war, I was a schoolteacher in a small village outside Moscow. Taught mathematics to children who'd rather be outside playing. Lived with my wife, Katya, in a modest apartment. We were saving for a house, had plans, a future. That was Ivan Volkov. 28 years old in the summer of 1941. That man is dead now, buried somewhere in the ruins of Stalingrad. What survived was something else. When the Germans invaded in June 41, everything changed overnight. The party called for volunteers. The motherland was in danger. Every able-bodied man was expected to do his duty. I joined up in July, kissed Katya goodbye, and reported for training. The training was rushed, brutal. They didn't have time to make us into proper soldiers. The front was collapsing. The Germans were advancing. They just needed bodies to throw at the enemy. 6 weeks, and they handed us a Mosin Nagant rifle and told us we were infantrymen now. Some of the men in my unit couldn't even shoot straight. Farm boys who'd never held a gun. Factory workers who'd spent their lives at machines. We were led by officers who'd survived the purges. The competent ones had been shot as traitors years before, so we got what was left. But we believed in Stalin, in the party, in the righteousness of our cause. The fascists had invaded our homeland. We would drive them back. We would protect Mother Russia. I wrote to Katya whenever I could, told her I was fine, that we were winning, that I'd be home soon. Lies mostly, but necessary ones. By September 1942, I'd been in combat for over a year, seen the Germans push us back, always back, lost count of how many battles, how many retreats, how many friends left behind in the snow. Then came the orders. We were being sent to Stalingrad, the city on the Volga that bore Stalin's name, the city that could not fall, the city that would become our graveyard. We crossed the Volga at night. The river was under constant bombardment. German artillery had the range down perfectly. The barges were packed with men, ammunition, supplies, sitting ducks. The shells started falling halfway across. Geysers of water erupting around us. Men screaming as shrapnel tore through the crowded deck. One barge took a direct hit and just disintegrated. Bodies and equipment blown into the black water. The rest of us kept going because there was nowhere else to go. I made it to the western bank, soaked and shaking. Not from the water, from fear. The city was burning. The whole horizon was orange and red, towers of smoke rising into the night sky. The Luftwaffe had been bombing Stalingrad for weeks. What had been a city of 400,000 was now a landscape from nightmare. We moved through the ruins in the darkness. Buildings were just shells, walls standing like broken teeth. The streets were rubble and debris and bodies, German and Soviet, military and civilian, some fresh, some weeks old. The smell was indescribable. Our orders were simple. Hold the city. Every building, every room, every inch of ground. The Germans wanted Stalingrad, and we were going to make them pay for it in blood. My unit, what was left of it, was assigned to defend a district near the Barricadi factory. The fighting there was already house to house, room to room, sometimes just opposite sides of the same wall. The Germans had tanks, artillery, air support. We had rifles and grenades and rage, and orders that said anyone who retreated would be shot by our own blocking detachments. Not one step back. Those weren't just words. They were literal. I killed my first German on the second day. He came around a corner in a ruined apartment building, and we almost collided. For a second, we just stared at each other, both shocked. Then instinct took over. I was faster, drove my bayonet into his stomach before he could raise his rifle. He was young, maybe 20, blonde hair, blue eyes. made this gurgling sound as he died. I can still hear it. There was no time to think about it. His comrades were right behind him. We fought in that building for 6 hours, room by room, floor by floor. Grenades tossed through doorways, automatic fire in close quarters where you couldn't miss, men grappling with knives and entrenching tools when the ammunition ran out. We held the building, lost 12 men doing it. The Germans lost more. That became the pattern. Fight for a building. Hold it for a day or a week, lose it, take it back. The same pile of rubble changing hands 3, 4, 5 times, each time leaving more bodies in the wreckage. The cold came early that year, October, and already the temperature was dropping below freezing at night. We had summer uniforms still. The winter gear hadn't arrived, so we stripped the dead. German coats were warmer than ours. We'd peel them off frozen corpses and wear them. Sometimes you'd put on a coat and find a letter in the pocket, a photograph. Realize the man you'd killed had a family, a life, dreams. You learned to stop looking. Supplies came across the Volga when they could. Food, ammunition, reinforcements. Never enough. We were on starvation rations, a piece of bread, watery soup if you were lucky. You ate anything you could find. Rats, leather. There were rumors of worse, but we didn't talk about it. The Germans were in the same situation. Worse, maybe. Their supply lines were stretched thin. We'd find their dead, and they were just as starved, just as frozen as we were. 2 armies eating each other alive in the ruins of a city that didn't exist anymore. November came, and the real cold arrived. -20, -30, the kind of cold that kills as surely as bullets. We were fighting for a grain elevator near the river. Massive concrete structure, half collapsed from bombing. The Germans held the upper floors. We held the lower levels. Between us was a killing ground of rubble and twisted metal. The fighting there went on for 3 days without stopping. 3 days. No sleep, no relief, just constant combat in the dark, freezing interior of that building. You couldn't tell day from night. Couldn't tell if you'd been fighting for hours or minutes. I remember one moment, maybe the second day, I was crouched behind a pile of grain sacks, trying to reload my rifle. My fingers were so cold I could barely work the bolt. Across from me, maybe 10 meters away, a German was doing the same thing. We made eye contact. For a moment, neither of us moved. Just 2 frozen, exhausted men who'd been trying to kill each other for days. Then someone started shooting, and we both dove for cover, and the moment was gone. My friend Alexei died in that elevator, took a burst of machine gun fire in the chest, died in my arms, blood steaming in the cold air. His last words were about his mother. They always are. We held the elevator. Don't ask me how. When reinforcements finally reached us, there were 18 survivors out of the 50 men who'd started the defense. We looked like dead men walking. Couldn't speak properly, couldn't stop shaking. They gave us 6 hours rest, then sent us back into the line. The city was a maze of ruins now. You navigated by landmarks that didn't exist anymore. The building that used to be a department store, the square where the fountain was. Everything was rubble and shell craters and frozen corpses used as fortifications. The rats were everywhere, fat on the dead, bold. They'd attack wounded men who couldn't fight back. I saw things I still can't talk about. What the rats did, what starvation drove men to do. We became animals ourselves. Had to. Humanity was a luxury we couldn't afford. You killed without thinking, looted the dead without remorse, slept in rooms with corpses because they blocked the wind, ate whatever you could find and tried not to think about where it came from. The snipers were the worst. Both sides had them. They'd wait in the ruins for hours, days, for a single shot. You learned never to show yourself in the same place twice, never to move in patterns, never to stop and think, because that extra second of hesitation was when the bullet found you. Sergeant Dmitri, veteran of the First War, toughest man I'd ever known, got hit by a sniper, clean through the head. There 1 second, gone the next. We couldn't even recover his body. It lay there in the street for weeks, frozen solid until a tank crushed it. The German offensive pushed us back to the Volga's edge. We were compressed into a narrow strip of ruins with the river at our backs. No retreat possible. This was where we'd make our stand or die. The artillery never stopped. German shells from the west. Our own guns firing from across the river. The ground shook constantly. Buildings that had somehow survived months of fighting would finally collapse, burying whoever was inside. German or Soviet didn't matter. The rubble killed everyone the same. I stopped counting days, stopped thinking about Katya or home or any kind of future. There was only now, this moment, this building, this enemy. Survive the next hour and maybe you'd survive the one after that. We were told the Germans were suffering too, that their Sixth Army was trapped, that we'd encircled them in Operation Uranus. But from where we stood, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like mutual annihilation. December arrived. The temperature dropped to -40. Men froze to death at their posts. You'd tap a comrade on the shoulder and he'd topple over, dead for hours but frozen upright. Weapons stopped working. Oil froze. Metal stuck to bare skin. And still we fought. Still they attacked. Still the city burned and bled and refused to die. I killed how many Germans? I don't know. Stopped counting after the grain elevator. Killed them with bullets and grenades and once with a sharpened piece of metal when my rifle jammed. Killed them and felt nothing. Nothing at all. That's when I knew I'd become something else. The teacher from Moscow was gone. Ivan Volkov was gone. What remained was just a killing machine in a frozen hell, too numb to die, too damaged to live. January 1943. We'd been fighting in Stalingrad for 4 months. Felt like 4 years. Felt like forever. The Germans were trapped now, their Sixth Army encircled. We'd cut them off from resupply. They were starving, freezing, dying. But they kept fighting. What else could they do? Surrender meant prisoner camps in Siberia. Most wouldn't survive that either. So we ground each other down, street by street, building by building, body by body. I was in a unit defending the Red October factory. Ironic name for a place that had become a slaughterhouse. The factory was a labyrinth of twisted machinery, collapsed workshops, and fighting positions carved into industrial ruins. New conscripts arrived sometimes, fresh troops from across the Volga. You could tell them immediately. They still looked human, still had hope in their eyes. The veterans said nothing to them. What could you say? They'd learn or they'd die. Usually both. There was a boy, couldn't have been more than 18, who arrived in mid-January. Mikhail, I think his name was. Terrified. Kept asking questions about what to do, how to survive. The others ignored him. He lasted 2 days, stepped on a mine while moving through a collapsed wall. The explosion was muffled by the snow. When we found him, there wasn't enough left to bury. I felt nothing. That scared me more than anything, that I could watch a boy die and feel absolutely nothing. The routine became mechanical. Stand guard in positions so cold the metal of your rifle would freeze to your hands. Watch for German movement through gaps in rubble. Shoot when you saw something. Try not to think. Food was almost non-existent now. A slice of bread if you were lucky. Sometimes just hot water with a few grains of wheat floating in it, and we called that soup. Men were dying of starvation as much as combat. You'd wake up next to someone who'd simply stopped living during the night. The wounded were the worst. We couldn't evacuate most of them. The Volga crossing was too dangerous. So they'd lie in freezing cellars, hoping for medical supplies that never came. Their screams and moans became background noise. You learned to ignore it like you ignored everything else. Sometimes we'd find German positions where they'd all frozen to death, just sitting there at their posts, weapons ready, dead for days. We'd take their supplies, ammunition, food if they had any, boots if they fit, strip them like we'd strip our own. The propaganda said we were winning, that the fascist invaders would soon be destroyed. That victory was certain. The commissars would read these proclamations and we'd nod and pretend to believe. Then go back to fighting and dying in the same 100 meters of ruins we'd been fighting over for months. There were moments of strange quiet. Artillery would stop. Shooting would cease. Both sides too exhausted to continue. You'd sit in your position and hear the wind howling through the ruins, and for a moment you'd almost remember what peace felt like. Then someone would start shooting again and it would all resume. I got a letter from Katya in late January. First word from home in months. The paper was stained and crumpled, had passed through many hands to reach me. She wrote about the cold winter in Moscow, about her work in a munitions factory, about how she prayed for my safety. I read it 3 times, tried to remember her face clearly, couldn't, tried to picture our old life together. It seemed like something from a dream, something that had happened to someone else. I never wrote back. What would I say? That I'd become something she wouldn't recognize? That I killed men without feeling? That I'd forgotten how to be human? Better she remember the man I was, not the thing I'd become. February came. The Germans were collapsing now, running out of everything, food, ammunition, hope. But that made them more dangerous, not less. Desperate men fight like cornered animals. We pushed forward meter by meter, took back buildings we'd lost months ago. Each one cost lives. Each one was paid for in blood and suffering. I'd been fighting for 18 months straight by then. Survived when so many hadn't. The odds said I should be dead 100 times over. Maybe I was. Maybe we all were. And this was just hell continuing forever. The end came in early February. The remaining Germans in our sector were compressed into a small pocket near the tractor factory. Starving, frozen, dying. We were ordered to clear them out. Final push. Finish it. I went in with what remained of my unit. 8 men out of the 50 I'd started with back in September. We moved through the ruins toward the German positions. No resistance at first. That made it worse somehow. The silence. Then we found them. They weren't fighting anymore. Couldn't. They were in a basement, maybe 30 German soldiers huddled together for warmth. Most were wounded. All were starving. Some were already dead, frozen in sitting positions. They looked up at us when we came down the stairs. Didn't raise their weapons, didn't move, just stared with hollow eyes that mirrored our own. One of them, an officer, said something in German. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. Surrender, please, mercy. The sergeant with us, Volkov, same surname as me, but no relation, raised his PPS-H submachine gun. Orders are to clear the position, he said. I knew what that meant, what it always meant. They've surrendered, I said. My voice sounded strange. Hadn't spoken much in weeks. They're fascists, Volkov said. They came to our country, killed our people, burned our cities. He wasn't wrong. Everything he said was true. These men had invaded our homeland, had laid siege to Stalingrad, had killed how many of my comrades. But looking at them, I didn't see invaders. I saw what we'd all become. Broken men in a broken city, ground down by a war that had stripped away everything human. One of the Germans was crying, just sitting there, tears freezing on his cheeks, too weak to even wipe them away. Volkov opened fire. The others joined in. The basement filled with noise and smoke and death. I didn't fire. couldn't. Just stood there watching as 30 men who'd already been defeated were killed, executed, murdered. When it was over, the silence was deafening. "Why didn't you shoot?" Volkov asked me. I didn't have an answer, didn't know myself. We moved on, cleared 3 more buildings that day, found more Germans in similar condition. Each time the same thing happened. Each time I didn't fire. That night, Volkov reported me to the commissar. Said I was showing sympathy for the enemy, that I was politically unreliable. The commissar called me in, asked if it was true. I said yes. He stared at me for a long moment. I waited for him to draw his pistol. That's what happened to soldiers who refused orders. Summary execution. Instead, he said, "Get out of my sight. You're being transferred to a rear unit." I don't know why he spared me. Maybe he was tired, too. Maybe he understood something. Maybe he just didn't want to waste another bullet. I left Stalingrad 3 days later, February 8th, 1943. Crossed the Volga heading east for the first time in 4 months. Behind me, the city was still burning, still dying. But the battle was essentially over. The Germans would surrender within a week. We'd won. Stalingrad was ours. I felt nothing. No relief, no joy, no sense of victory. I'd survived Stalingrad. But whatever I'd been before, that man was dead. Left behind in those ruins along with everyone else who'd fought there. The war continued. I was sent to a supply unit far from the front. Spent the rest of the war loading trucks and sorting equipment. Safe. Useless. While other men fought to Berlin, I counted ammunition crates and tried not to think about the basement. About 30 men who'd already lost. About the fact that I'd finally found a line I couldn't cross, and it had come too late. Too late for them. Too late for me. Too late for any of us. The war ended in May 1945. I was in a supply depot outside Moscow when we heard the news. Everyone celebrated, cheered, cried with joy. I stood there and felt the same emptiness I'd felt since Stalingrad. They gave us medals, parades, called us heroes of the great patriotic war, defenders of the motherland. I wore my medals once at the victory parade, then put them in a drawer and never looked at them again. Katya was waiting when I returned. She'd survived the war, survived the hardships, kept our small apartment through everything. She threw her arms around me and wept with happiness. I stood there like a statue, couldn't return the embrace, couldn't feel what I was supposed to feel. She pulled back and looked at my face. I saw the moment she understood, the recognition in her eyes that the man she'd married wasn't the man who came back. We tried. God knows we tried. I went back to teaching, stood in front of classrooms and taught mathematics like before, but I couldn't connect with the students anymore. Couldn't care about equations and theorems when I'd seen what I'd seen. The nightmares came every night. The grain elevator, the frozen corpses, the basement, always the basement. Those 30 pairs of eyes staring at me while gunfire echoed. I'd wake up screaming, and Katya would try to comfort me, and I'd push her away because I couldn't stand to be touched. I started drinking. Vodka helped dull everything, made the nights bearable, made the days possible. Katya begged me to stop, to talk to someone, to let her help. How could I explain? How could I tell her about what we did in Stalingrad? About the things we became? About the fact that I'd killed men and felt nothing? But when I finally refused to kill, it was somehow worse. She left me in 1951. I don't blame her. She'd waited through the whole war for a man who died in Stalingrad. What came back was just a ghost wearing his face. I see them sometimes. Alexei dying in the grain elevator. Sergeant Dmitri's frozen body in the street. That young boy, Mikhail, stepping on the mine. The Germans in the basement, crying, surrendering, dying, but mostly I see myself. The man I was in September 1942, still believing in something, still human. I watch him cross the Volga and enter that burning city, and I want to warn him, want to tell him to run, to desert, to do anything except what he's about to do. But he goes anyway. And Stalingrad destroys him like it destroyed everyone. The Soviet Union built monuments to Stalingrad. The motherland calls, a massive statue on Mamayev Kurgan, museums, memorials. They call it the turning point of the war, the great victory that saved the motherland. They're right, I suppose, militarily, strategically. But they don't talk about what it cost. Not just the dead, over 1 million casualties on both sides, but what it did to those who survived. I went back once, in 1967, 25 years after the battle. The city had been rebuilt. New buildings, new streets, clean and modern. No trace of the ruins remained. I walked through the rebuilt streets looking for landmarks that didn't exist anymore. The grain elevator was gone. The Red October factory had been rebuilt. The basement where those Germans died, I couldn't even find where it had been. It was like it never happened, like the whole nightmare was erased. But I still carry it, every day, every night. I'm 73 years old now, and Stalingrad is still more real to me than anything else. The life I've lived since, teaching, retiring, growing old, it all feels like a dream, an afterlife. The real me died in Stalingrad in 1943. What survived was just an echo, a ghost walking through a world it no longer understands. Young people today, they know Stalingrad from textbooks. Great victory, turning point. They see the monuments and think they understand. They don't, can't. You can't understand hell from reading about it. You can't understand what war does to men, how it takes everything you are and burns it away until there's nothing left but survival instinct and numbness. They tell stories about Stalingrad like it was glorious, like it was heroic. They're wrong. There was no glory there, no honor. Just two armies destroying each other and a city in the frozen ruins between them. I killed men at Stalingrad, many men. Did what I was told because that's what soldiers do. Then one day I couldn't do it anymore. Found a line I couldn't cross. And somehow that moment, that refusal, that's what haunts me most. Not the men I killed, the men I didn't kill, the 30 Germans in the basement who died anyway because my refusal changed nothing, saved no one, meant nothing. Maybe that's the real lesson of Stalingrad. That individual conscience means nothing in industrial slaughter. That morality disappears when survival is all that matters. That war makes monsters of everyone, whether you pull the trigger or not. I survived Stalingrad, got to live another 50 years, got to see my country rebuild and prosper, got to die in bed instead of freezing in ruins. They call that victory. But I've been dead since 1943, been dead since I crossed that river and entered that burning city. Been dead since I became something that could kill without feeling and then, finally, couldn't kill and felt everything. Hell isn't hot. Hell is cold. Hell is Stalingrad in winter. And I never left. None of us did.